behalf of the Shillong Chamber Choir, I would like to thank all of you who have taken the trouble to come here today, and for all our friends who have joined us on Zoom. I want to thank you for sharing in our grief. It is with great difficulty that I stand here. I think it's perhaps the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. I stand here to speak about my brother. No one ever told me that grief felt so much like fear. I am not afraid, but the sensation is like being afraid. The same fluttering in the stomach, the same restlessness, the yawning. I keep on swallowing. At times it feels like being mildly drunk, concussed. There is a sort of an invisible blanket between the world and me. So wrote C.S. Lewis when his wife died. And this articulates in part what I feel, and perhaps what many of you who have been part of Neil feel today. Neil belonged to so much of us, and to all of us gathered here today. Even people who did not know him personally feel that dreadful sense of loss. It can be said that his phenomenal gift of entertainment, not just on the stage but in daily life, his humor, but most of all his compassion and the ability to draw to himself people of all walks of life, faiths, communities, cultures, and races, set him apart from much of humanity. He was an extraordinary child. He hated going to school. No matter what school my parents put him in, he tried to avoid going as much as he could. On hindsight, we now realize that a conventional school system stifled and threatened to kill his creative spirit, which is why in later life he sought to educate and create a learning space for children and students that was inspiring, challenging, and original. I learned how to play the piano at a very early age and sought to become a teacher to all who would learn from me. But my other siblings resisted all my efforts. It was only Neil, at the tender age of 3.5. He sat by the piano and he learned how to play chopsticks, and soon graduated to all the hits from The Sound of Music, the theme from Love Story, and many other tunes. My father would borrow records from friends, and we grew up with the songs of Perry Como, Petula Clark, Roger Whittaker, James Last, and many more. Daddy would show us off both to our friends. He would even ask me to play Hindi songs for some of his Hindi-speaking friends, and that is how Neil started to play Yadon Ki Bharat and Chura Liya before long. On the days when he would accompany whoever was picking me up and my sister from school, the girls would gather round him, asking him to play for them. Even our Mother Superior, who was the next in authority to God in our youthful eyes, was one of his fans. I was confounded that he even dared to say to her in his raspy voice, "First give me Sappi." Sappi was a peanut brittle sweet that was sold in the school canteen that I would bring home sometimes, as it was afforded only occasionally because pocket money was scarce and mostly non-existent. When his pockets were full, he would then proceed to enthrall his audiences. A little child, legs too short to reach the pedals, sits at the piano and faultlessly plays Beethoven's Fiordalisa. This is an excerpt from a poem written about Neil by our friend Robert Lingdo, whom we fondly called Bobby. That is how our friends remember him, legs too short to reach the floor, but fingers whizzing about flawlessly. And here I must make mention of Miss Beddoe, who did the St. Edmund's School musicals and made a huge impact upon his musicality when she did Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And here is a plea to all schools in Shillong and in the States. Please consider music education as important as all other subjects. There may be just another Neil waiting to grow up. Don't stifle some children with subjects they were not born to contend with. At home, he would make puppets to entertain people. He would fashion noses out of putty or dough and put on a disguise to scare the neighborhood kids. His music moved people to the very core. There was one concert at Caux in Switzerland where the hall was filled with people hugging each other and crying after the last song, What a Child Needs. I have never seen such a large entourage of many ladies and their husbands and young people tagging after Neil right down to the train station at Montreux to bid him and us goodbye, not wanting to let him go and to see a last glimpse of him. He was never afraid to say the things that he felt, even as a little boy. Once he told my father, "Daddy, why don't you be a little corrupt so that we can have nice things like other people?" My father's reply made a lasting impact on him. "Neil, I want to sleep well at night. This is why I will never do any of those things." We grew up in Pohkseh, rustic and carefree, and Neil spoke a dialect that was considered very rural, and that made him even more charming. The Lungstays and the Nichols Roys were our closest friends. We grew up in the same road. They helped me in the last few days to articulate and remember the Neil that charmed and endeared people. We sat with the Lungstay siblings, Lulu, Deng and Tutu, and laughed at the time when Neil, my sister Christine, and the Lungstay siblings, Lid and Hep, went off to the Rinjak market with homegrown vegetables and eggs from my mother's chicken shed. And they sat along the market pavement with all the other vegetable sellers to sell their produce. Every time they made a sale, one of them would go to the sweet shop